So this book is also, I heard, in well. So that's how writing journey. And she's almost finished writing. Then she's finished writing the next novel, which I've sent to publishers.
Welcome again.
Hi.
Shwetha, thank you so much for doing this with us. Since acceptance is the key here for the parent first, I want you to reiterate on what exactly autism is. It's not a disease.
It's not
That's
disease.
known.
Yes.
But what is it? What causes it? Are there sources where people can read it up and tell that to understand what it is? And this is not just for parents who have children who are autistic, even for the normal neurotypical parents, right? They need to know what it is so that they accept, yeah, it's not a very different thing, it's okay. And inclusion comes from everybody. It's not just the school or an institution as such, right? So for that, could you just reiterate on what exactly autism is? Is there a cause for it? Or is there any how do you red flags we will get to next. Through that journey, how do you find out, okay, probably this is what it is? And maybe by the time you figure out your child is autistic, you've already gone through the path of acceptance. You're into it already, right? So you have that in your mind, oh, maybe my child is autistic. So when you listen to it, or when it is formally diagnosed, maybe you're not in for a shock, or maybe some people are. So for those people, I'd like to understand, I want you to talk about that bit where what exactly it is, how can it be figured out, what causes it, around that space.
So like I told you, right, it's put simply, it is something called a socio-communication disorder. Okay. So when I say socio-communication disorder, as human beings, we are social animals, right? And we are constantly communicating with each other. Mm-hmm. Now we have a very defined way of relating to each other and communicating with each other, right? Now why are we so relatively successfully, be able to do all of this? That is because our 5 senses, okay, interact with the world in the way it should interact. Okay. So when I hear some noise, okay, it is X noise, and my threshold level of taking noise is the same as 70% of the people around me, right? So it's only when things get really loud that I get upset, right? So my hearing works the same as 70% of the people on the planet. My sense of smell works the same as 70% of the people on the planet. Okay, it's only when things get really bad that my sense of smell gets overwhelmed. Okay, I can feel most textures, right? Like 70% of the people on the planet. So as a child, I can play with sand, I can play with water to some extent, right? I can play with a lot of different textures, I can wear a lot of different clothes. Now when I walk on the ground, my feet can take the sensation. For a very small child, my baby can take the sensation of crawling. The baby can put their palms on the ground, put their knees on the ground, and be able to take that sensation, right? Because their senses work the way it is supposed to work. So hearing, touch, taste, smell, everything. Small babies are very curious about what the adults are eating. By the time they are like 8-9 months old, they don't want to eat baby food. They only want to eat whatever is there in the adults' plate, because their their sense of tongue and taste, basically they can tolerate different textures. Now what happens to people who are autistics is they have sensory differences. Now when I talk about sensory differences, it can be one sense, or it can be all the 5 senses, or it can be a combination. Now what happens is, for many of them, these senses are hypersensitive. So that means I'm talking at a certain level, at a certain decibel now, which you can take, which people in this room can take, right? Now for an autistic person with a hypersensitive hearing, it may seem as if I'm like shouting on top of my voice, so they just want to avoid conversation, they want to run away from me. And maybe they don't like the texture of certain tastes in their mouth. A very normal tasting food may seem extremely spicy and they can't take it. And they don't like the texture of sand because they feel it's poking their hands. They don't like the texture of the floor. They don't want to put their feet on the floor because it's freezing. So all of their senses react differently to the environment around them. So because, and in a child's development, the first development that happens in the baby is the senses, right? And every development follows that. A child uses his or her senses, a small baby, to interact with the world around them, and they learn and grow. But if these senses work differently, even the smallest of things can seem like immense to you, then every single aspect of your development starts getting impacted. So that is what happens in autism. People with autism have sensory differences. Because they have sensory differences, every single aspect of their development, right from their childhood, becomes different. So experiences that are very common for a neurotypical child can seem very overwhelming for these children. So they may not go out and play in the sand, they may not be willing to try a lot of different foods, they may not be willing to wear a lot of different clothes, they may not like going out because they don't like the noises and the sensory inputs from the world outside. So every development starts, right? And when that is the way they are, people around them are talking, there's the cooker going off in the house, there's the mixie going off in the house, and a small child, just, a small baby looks at the environment around, hears what people, is tuned to, what people are saying and hearing, and they imitate and they learn to speak, right? Now for this child who's autistic, whose senses can be so sharp that all of these experiences, seem very difficult to take, the child shuts himself or herself from the people. They refuse to make eye contact, they don't want to look at people, they don't want to, because the whole experience is so difficult for them, right? So, their ability to develop spoken language, verbal communication, and all of that starts to suffer because they don't want to look at another person. It is very difficult for them to imitate another person. So it isn't. It's a disorder that results as a result of the senses working differently.
Okay.
Now, not every autistic is hypersensitive. There are some who are hyposensitive, which is like literally the opposite of hypersensitive. So, unless I'm yelling, the child is not going to be tuned into what I'm saying. Unless I pour a bucket of water, the child doesn't feel wet. So these are the children who will be rolling on sand, and you're like, oh my God, she's so, why is she not reacting? But they would be that way. They would just not react because their senses don't feel it. So because their senses are different, they develop differently. Because they develop differently, they relate to the world around them very differently. And because they relate to the world around them differently, they pick up speech very late, or they pick up speech, they don't pick up speech, they need alternative, modes of communication. And everything, right? See, in our lives, school and home and everywhere, we are constantly relating to people, right? And all of these experiences can be a challenge because that's a completely different world for the child. I mean, the child experiences the world so differently, right? That there's no way this child understands this is not the way I'm supposed to relate to people around me. So that's put very simplistically, autism begins as a result of sensory differences. Now, autism is not something anybody can acquire. It is not a disease. So it's not like a child will, there are children who develop normally until the age of their 2 or 2.5, and then they have what is called as a bout of regression. That's what parents believe it is. But even these children are born with autism. It's a certain kind of autism where, you think they are developing normally till a certain age, and then, they start losing out on some of their skills. But even in those children, autism exists at birth.
Okay.
This is not something that can be acquired because of anything.
So there's no cause for,
it is very difficult to figure out the cause for autism.
Okay.
A lot of money has been spent on trying to figure out if autism has a genetic cause. Now, they have it's not a chromosomal disorder like Down syndrome, right? Where you can point and say this particular chromosome is responsible, right? Or so it is with autism, what they've realized is that there probably could be a genetic reason for this, meaning there could be certain genes which may be responsible, but it is not so simplistic, right? It is not just the genetics, but it is also, not just the way, I don't know, not just those genes, but even the way in which the child interacts with the environment, right? So it is a combination of genetic and environmental factors. So, and it is not one single gene or one single chromosome which is responsible, for you to like Down syndrome, to pinpoint and say, X, look, this is the cause, right? It is not. So, while people believe this could be hereditary, it is very difficult to figure out what the actual reason is.
Okay. Your parenting style has shifted with an autistic child.
Okay.
Has it? I mean, I'll put it that way. Has it
Probably.
changed? And if it has,
Probably.
how?
See, I think it's just, to be honest, Aditi is my older daughter, right? And oftentimes what most of us do with our first child is trial and error parenting, right? So from that sense, yes, it's been a trial and error parenting, but except it's been a very intense trial and error parenting, because with a neurotypical child there are examples around, and I believe the path is also very defined. Your child is going to grow up, meet all of these milestones, and at 2.5 years go to preschool, 6 years go to school, and then college and blah blah blah. It's a very defined path. Here there is no path, right? Step number one. Step number two, back when Aditi was diagnosed, there really wasn't too much of information that we could fall back upon to figure out what to do with our child, right? Add to this the fact that you yourself will have a journey of accepting your child for what she is or what he is, right? So yes, I mean, it was a very different path, very interesting path. We've had our adventures, we've had our misadventures. We obviously had lot of trial and error, but I think it's like, it's what I keep telling parents, right? As a parent, you don't give up on your child, because if you give up on your child, then there is nothing's going to work with your child, right? But if you try one thing or another, it's just about keeping the faith. It's about learning from your experiences. It's about learning from, and these days, honestly, it's also about learning from other parents, because there's so much, there are so many WhatsApp groups, there are parent support groups, there are people that you can talk to. The awareness level is much higher. And try, right, until you find that one thing that works for your child. So honestly, with Aditi, it was a lot of trial and error, but I think somewhere something worked. That's all.
Lovely. I mean, that's beautiful. Could you quote some of those beautiful moments, probably, with a typical parenting style? I may not have encountered these kind of things, She's shown me a beautiful side of the world. Anything on those lines?
So so Aditi was somebody with a lot of hypersensitivities around her mouth area, which is one of the reasons why she finds it very difficult to talk, right? So she was somebody who used to eat mashed food, food put in mixie for a very long time. She didn't want to, because she couldn't take. Eventually we realized it was a sensory difference because of autism. So she used to eat food mashed in mixie, till she was 3.5 years old almost, and then we had to do therapies to make sure that she starts eating. So finally, when she was eating idlis and satam shadam when she was, 3.5 years old, it was like 4 years old, it was like a big achievement for us, because, it took that much of effort till it got there. But I think for us, it was also the wake-up call of how different this is going to be, right? How off the beaten track this is going to be, because every single thing, right? And after I think 1 year of Kumaran's debacle and the preschool before that, we were very nervous when we moved her into the Montessori that she went to, right? And we weren't sure how it's going to work out, but I think there she settled very beautifully, and she started school in June, and November they had their school day. It was 10 years since they started that school. So they wanted Aditi to play the part of Saraswati in some dance, and I was like, I had literally written off, I think this girl is not going to, go on stage and wear all of this pavade and everything, which in fact I had to put pavade every single day in the evening for 1 month, so that, she wears it that day, because that's the level of, texture differences that she had. Even after that, I wasn't sure that it's going to work out. I went to the auditorium with my head, mind completely open, that last minute this girl is not going to go. And the program was supposed to start at 7. The chief guest decided to come late, gave a 45-minute speech. Okay. All of this time, Aditi was patiently waiting at the backstage. And when it was time for her performance, they came on stage. The song started off. 4 lines into the song, the mic went off. Okay. So, they were trying to make the mic all right. So these kids had to go backstage, come back again and perform again. And she did it.
Wow.
She went, she came back, and she did it, and we were like, oh my god, this is Aditi. So yeah, sometimes I think they surprise you, but I think for us the biggest surprise was, of course, we always knew Aditi was somebody who was very fond of reading, and we always knew she knew a lot more than what she was able to express. Also, because of their sensory differences, many of them find writing with a paper and a pencil very difficult. right? So they may not be able to write and express themselves completely as much as they know, because holding a pencil and writing is a sensorially difficult experience for them, right? But technology works like a charm for many of them. So when Aditi was around 13 or so, we moved her to Ishanya India Foundation, which is a learning center that works with adolescents and young adults on the spectrum, and they basically give them a lot of technology skills. So here Aditi was introduced to a text-to-speech app called Avas. So because she finds it very difficult to communicate verbally, she can type what she wants onto this app called Avas, and that will speak for her. Basically, whatever she has typed, it will say it out. So literally it's her voice. So when she was introduced to Avaz and she started to express, I mean, we always knew she understood more, okay, but then honestly some of the things that she said was like a revelation for us, even for me as a parent, right?
Moving on, what's been what, according to you, what are the biggest misconceptions that society has about autistic children?
See, I think society's understanding of autism is very narrow to the kind that they see on TV shows, which sadly are all, stereotypes that don't exist in 1% of the autistic population even, right? So if you look at all of these, autism-based shows on Netflix and a bunch of other places, they portray autistics as being brilliant in some ways and completely deficient in other ways, right? That is a complete fallacy. So this whole concept of something called being a savant, which is exceptionally good at something, exists in less than 1% of the autistic population. Today, we are saying that 1 in 100 children in India are autistic, okay? And that is because we probably have lesser awareness levels. We are saying 1 in 36 children in the US could be on the autism spectrum. They could be neurodivergent. So are we saying that 1 in 100 kids in India are brilliant? Are we saying that 1 in 36 kids in the US are brilliant? They are not. You know, that entire savant skills exists in just 1% of the autistic population, right? And if you watch some of the shows like Extraordinary Attorney Woo or Atypical or, a bunch of others, they have all these physical stereotypes. It doesn't exist in all autistics. It exists in some autistics. So sadly, society's conception of autism is defined by all of these shows. So the way I like to say it is, just like us, neurotypicals, most of us have average intelligence, right? Below average productivity on most days. And we are good at some things, we are not so good at some things. Now, if we are sensible enough going into adulthood, we pick up on the things that we are good at and try to, make the most of our lives. Think of autistics also like that. It's a very wide spectrum, right? Your child can be mildly autistic, your child can have moderate autism, or your child, very few have severe autism, right? Like neurotypical world, most children have average intelligence, average to above average intelligence. There are things that they are good at. There are things they obviously struggle with because sensorially they are so different from us. And this is the basic understanding that we need to have about autism, that's all. The day we realize this is what autism is, and we realize what are the things the child is struggling with, right? Noises, lights, smells, we can make what is called as accommodations. In our daily routine, in school, in our environments, we can try to accommodate for a child's difficulties, accommodate for a child's differences, right? If for instance, I have 2 apartments where I live, and my daughter Aditi is extremely, she gets very irked if she hears the mixie, the maid washing vessels, and the pressure cooker and the maid conversing, happening at the same time. Now, all of this happens at the same time in the morning. So what she does is she goes off to the other house so that, she can be in peace. So she gets her accommodation, a quiet space, right? So oftentimes it's just that, it's about one being able to identify what the child is good at. When I say good at, I'm not saying savant, exceptional, brilliant, but things that the child is able to do, build on those things so that the child becomes more confident, the child becomes a happier and well-adjusted person going into adolescence and adulthood, and give accommodations for their difficulties, which is not very difficult. If you're going out, like for instance when we go out, Aditi wears AirPods or she wears noise cancelling headphones. How difficult is it to get a child to wear that? It's not rocket science, right? And then the whole experience becomes a little easier for her. Now if we are traveling, for instance, instance, if we are flying, a lot of now airports in India, Bangalore Airport and Delhi Airport, are signed into something called the Sunflower Program. But even before this, we've had very positive experiences at the airport. So if you tell them beforehand that you're traveling with an autistic person, so what happens under the Sunflower Program is that they get to wear this lanyard with the sunflower on it. This is basically for people with invisible disabilities. So the person there would know. So what they get is they get priority check-in. Their baggages get checked in priority, and then they get priority boarding. They get to wait in a quieter. So you're like traveling, with your autistic child. You can choose a quieter part of the airport or a lounge, quieter part of the lounge to wait for your flight. Simple things like that. It's not in a mainstream school. It could be maybe a child with mild autism is in the class. Now this child gets very overwhelmed in the PE class because all kids are running and there's so much of noise and everything else. So maybe this child can be given permission to just attend the PE class for 10 minutes and take a break after that. It's not rocket science. These are little accommodations that all of us can do, right? So I think this is important. This understanding is important that, as a society, for us to understand that autism is just a different way of being. And oftentimes what is required, to be truly inclusive is one, accept it as just that, a different way of being. Nothing that is good, nothing that is bad, and understand that they are just like you and me. Most of them have average intelligence and will do average job on an average day. And there are some things that they struggle with, but you can help them with that in very simple ways, very simple accommodations, which is not rocket science. Sadly, I don't think, any of the shows on TV or anything talk about this aspect. But I think if we have to talk about a truly inclusive society and talk about truly understanding autism, I think we just have to understand this. Once we get this, I think it is not difficult for anybody to be inclusive.
Okay. Are there any space on the internet or any books or any resources that we can refer to understand this better for anybody who would want to know more about it?
There are lots of resources. Okay. So one of the things that I would recommend is Aditi actually wrote a blog for Bookosmia. I'll share the link with you. Sure. This lists books that you can introduce to children within the between the age group of 5 to young adults, all graded by age, which talks about neurodivergence. Many of the books talks about autism. So it's for these children and teens and young adults to read these books and understand about autism. Many of these books are fiction books. So it's like so you get a very organic understanding through what the character does and just the way the character is, right? Okay. So there are books like that you can read about autism, and there are a lot of sites that you can go to. So Aditi is a part of this organization called ION, Institute of Neurodiversity. It's a Geneva, Europe-based not-for-profit which has chapters around the world, and Aditi is on the steering committee of the India chapter. Primarily they work in the space of raising awareness, in the spaces of education, healthcare, living, work and all of that. Okay. So their site is also, the ION Global site, also has a lot of blogs and content, about neurodiversity. It has content about autism, which will help a lot of people understand, what is it. I think they largely help people understand autistic lived experiences. So basically, autistics share their experiences on these platforms. So, what's the best way to understand autism than to hear about it from autistics themselves, right? Sure. So there are a lot of sites like this where there are lived experiences. And there are also sites that are very, what we call as neuroaffirming. So now there are basically two lenses to looking at autism, ADHD, any kind of neurodiversity, right? One is the medical lens. Now what does the medical lens do? The medical lens says that people with autism, people with ADHD, people with specific learning disabilities, they are deficient in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what do we as a society do? We work with them in order for them to overcome these deficiencies. To some extent, yes, that is needed, right? And then there is the social or the neuroaffirming lens. The social lens says that this is the way they have been created, right? So what is disabling them? Is it the society and the societal attitudes that's disabling them, or is it, the person's disability itself? So when you look at it broadly, it's the society's attitude which is disabling them more. right? So the neuroaffirming people say that we'll provide accommodations. A person will thrive in an environment in which they are happy, which is comfortable for them, right? So if you want people with neurodivergence to thrive, live to the best of their abilities, we have to make accommodations to the environment, be that a learning environment, be that environment at home, be that environment in school, be that environment in workplace or whatever, right? Or in public spaces. We will make it more accessible. We will make accommodations so that these people can live and work to the best of their abilities. So there are sites like this one called Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, which is, I think, also a very good resource where people can go and get a idea about autism. And there are quite a few resources like that actually.
Okay, nice. What I understand with what you're saying is an autistic child is aware that the child is autistic?
See, I'm sure I, come from a space of what is called as presuming competence. So when we work with an autistic child, right, oftentimes what happens is because the child is not expressive enough, we assume that the child doesn't know enough, right? But what we believe is that when we go to work with a child, we should presume competence. Because the child is not able to express to me doesn't mean that the child doesn't know. It only means that the child has no way of expression. So I will treat this child the way I will treat a neurotypical child of her age, right? So when you, if that is the lens from which you are coming, which is very true also, because most autistic children are very intelligent children, they become very aware that they are different, right? Especially when they have obvious differences in terms of them trying and not being able to speak and things like that, they become very aware that they are different from a very young age, which is why, in fact, we tell parents also, to tell your child when your child is 8 or 9 or whenever you think, they are ready for it, tell your child that your child is autistic, right? Because, if you don't tell that, they are going to grow up believing that they are fault, I don't know, they are wrong in some way, or their way of being is wrong, or something is wrong with them, that's why they are not able to measure up. That is not what it is, right? So you might as well tell them when they are ready for it, 7 years, 8 years, that they are autistic. But oftentimes children realize that they are different. Obviously, when others are doing things so easily around them and they're struggling with those very same things, obviously they'll realize, right, something is not quite in place.
When acceptance for them is about the neurotypical people are normal, I wish we looked at them normal too, right?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully someday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Soon.